part 95 of ASP.NET MVC tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss onBegin, onComplete, onSuccess, and onFailure properties of Ajax Options class. This is continuation to part 94, so please watch part 94 before proceeding. Using these four properties of the Ajax Options class, we can associate JavaScript functions that get called on the client at different stages of an Ajax request-response cycle. The associated JavaScript function with this onBegin property is automatically called before the server-side action method is invoked. Let me explain what I mean. This is the example that we have been working with in the previous sessions of this video series. Now, when we click this all link, this all action method within the home controller gets invoked. But then if we have specified onBegin property, then the associated JavaScript function is going to get automatically called before this server-side action method is invoked. And if we have specified onComplete property, then the associated JavaScript function is invoked after the response data has been instantiated, but immediately before the page is updated with that response data. So when the controller action method completes execution, we have this response data which is instantiated. Now, immediately before the UI is updated with that response data, that's when the JavaScript function that is associated with this onComplete property is automatically invoked. Whereas if we have specified onSuccess property, then the JavaScript function is invoked immediately after the page is updated, with the data from that response object. If at all, if there is any failure, then the JavaScript function that is associated with this property is invoked. Let's look at an example of using these properties. First of all, let's get rid of this time information. So within the index view, let's get rid of that line, and within students partial view, let's get rid of that. Let's run the application. So now we shouldn't get the time information anymore. Okay, so when we click this all link, we get all students data here. But then look at this, when I click top 3, I have this data still, all students there, and then the image is right there. Now my requirement, let's say for example, we want, as soon as I click this link, I want this data to be cleared, and then that spinning image should be present there. And as soon as we have the data available, the UI should be updated. Let's see how to achieve that. So we basically want to clear the student's information that's present in this div tag. Okay, so within our index view, this is the div tag which displays student information. So first, let's go ahead and write some JavaScript function which is going to clear that div contents. So within our page, I'm going to include a script tag. So script type equals text/JavaScript, language is JavaScript. So let's write a function here. Maybe let's call this clear results. So what we want this function to do, basically clear the contents of this div tag. Okay, so let's use jQuery. So $, and what is the ID of that div tag? It's called div student. So let's copy the ID. So here we are using the jQuery selector, ID selector pound symbol. And then once we have the div tag, all we want to do is invoke the empty method which is going to clear the contents of the div. Okay, now we need to associate this JavaScript function with onBegin property. So we have the Ajax options object here. So I'm going to specify onBegin property and then associate this JavaScript function, clear results. Okay, let's do it for the rest of the action links that we have. Alright, so let's go ahead and run this. So when we click top 3, so first top 3 students should be displayed. And now when we click bottom 3, look at that, the data is immediately cleared, and then the spinning image, and as soon as the data becomes available, we have that information displayed. So basically, this the JavaScript function that is associated with the onBegin property is executed before the server-side action method is called. So as soon as we click on the link, this JavaScript function gets called, which is going to clear the contents of the div. Okay, now this onBegin function, this onBegin property can also be used to programmatically cancel the invocation of the server-side controller action method. Let's say, for example, based on some conditions, I want to be able to cancel the execution of this controller action method. Again, we can very easily achieve that using this onBegin property. So let's write some function here. Cancel call. So basically, this function has to return true or false. If this function returns true, then the call to the server side controller action method will continue and it will be invoked. Otherwise, if this function returns false, then the call will be cancelled. Okay, so basically you can specify any condition depending on your application requirement, but let's come out, this condition will never be true. So if 1 equals to true, that will always be false. But then let's say we want to return true in that case. Else let's return false. And then let's alert a message. Action method will not be invoked. Alright, now let's associate this with this onBegin property. So this method gets automatically invoked before a call to the server-side action method is made. And then if you look at this cancel call function, what is it doing? It is going to return false. Okay, so if this function returns false, what's going to happen? The application will not issue a call to the server-side controller action method. So basically we are canceling the execution there. Okay, so this condition will be false, so it will come into the else block and return false. That's why the server-side controller action method will not be called. Okay, so here we are using some crazy condition, but then in your application, depending on your application requirement, you may give whatever conditions you want. So let's go ahead and run this and see if we get the desired output. Look at that, action method will not be invoked. I click OK, no animation, and there is no call to the server-side action method. Alright, so let's revert this back to clear results. Alright, so let's now look at using this onSuccess property. Okay, now let's say immediately after we have displayed, so let's save these changes here and then let's refresh this view. So when we click top 3, we get the top 3 students, and then their details will be displayed here. But immediately after the details are displayed, I also want to display the total number of students within that result set. Okay, so basically for that we can use this onSuccess property. Okay, so as soon as the response, as soon as the UI is updated, the JavaScript function that is associated with this onSuccess property will get called. So at that point we can count the number of rows in the table that displays these details, and then present that information. Okay, so basically this information is presented by this partial view, student partial view, and here notice that we have a table. So let's give an ID for this table. Maybe let's call it students table. Okay, so we can use the students this ID and then count the number of rows within this table. So within our index view, I'm going to write another function. Let's call this count rows, and this function So let's use the ID selector, which is pound. So basically, within that table, a table which has got that ID, within that table I want the total rows, and I can use the length property, which is going to give us the total number of rows within that student table. But then look at this, within the student table, this is the table header, so that will also be counted. So we want to subtract 1 from the length, and then let's append some text to this. So rows retrieved. Alright, and then let's use a JavaScript alert to display this information on the UI. Alright, so length property, and then we want to subtract 1 from that. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. And look at this, when we click top 3, so the spinning image, as soon as the information is updated, we should also get an alert. For some reason we are not getting that alert. And why is that? We have written the function, but we have not associated this with onSuccess property. So let's go ahead and specify onSuccess property and then associate this function, count rows. And let's do the same thing with other action links that we have. Alright, so let's run this now. So top 3. Look at that, we have 3 rows there, 3 rows retrieved. I click OK and we are done. Okay, similarly if you click on this link, depending on the number of rows retrieved, that information will be displayed. So very useful Ajax options. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.